Welcome to the Director's Take, everyone. Today we've got two wonderful filmmakers and their film Surviving Earth is out on the 24th of April. We'll begin with Sophie Reynolds, who is a producer who works across film and TV in the UK with notable credits in producing all 5 episodes of Malpractice, the medical thriller directed by Philip Barantini and starring Niamh Algar. She also produced the second series of The State of the Union, written by Nick Hornby and directed by Stephen Frears. And she set up the Producers Roundtable with Lauren Dunn and Helen Simmons to campaign for better accessibility and career sustainability for UK film producers. And she's got her own production company called Sona Films, and it's through that which Surviving Earth was produced via FILM4 and the BFI. Also got director Thea Gajic, and Thea is a writer and director and Screen International Star of Tomorrow, born and raised in South London, and her first short film, Run, won a New Talent Award at the BFI Feature Film Festival, earning her a Sundance Ignite Fellowship, and a follow-up short, The Importance of Skin, premiered via Short of the Week, and she was then commissioned by Film London to make a follow-up to this film called Eli. And I mention these because they're all available to watch on your website, so it's useful for our audience who kind of range from early career all the way through to mid. And a debut feature, Surviving Earth, which was supported by Film4 and BFI, premiered at South by Southwest in 2025 and went on to have a strong festival run, landing at San Francisco and Edinburgh. And it's also, as I said, going to be in cinemas on the 24th of April, and it's the focus of our conversation today. So welcome to the podcast, Sophie and Thea.
Hi, thank you.
We always like to start with something simple on the podcast. So we'll start with yourself, Thea. So what is directing?
That's not simple. Directing is the work of bringing together an idea and a story to be seen on the screen. It is a collaboration between lots of artists who work towards one shared vision and one shared creative goal to better the world with good stories.
Great.
Love that. You know,
That's brilliant.
Honestly, it throws everyone. So to similarly throw you under the bus, Sophie, what is producing?
Nobody knows what producing is, and that's actually a far more common question that, and including my family, who are like, what's the difference between directing and producing? I would say it is bringing to it. We're more macro, right? So we see something, I'd say 5 steps back from, say, the director or the writer. And I think it's about facilitating and bringing the best creativity out of everyone and bringing the best team together. I think there's also a lot to do with well-being, and like this industry is really tough, and we'll get into it. Like making this film, elements have been tough, and I think a lot of my job as a producer is to just make sure everyone's okay. And I think that there's a wider sort of industry power that producers have in terms of selecting which stories they back and which talent they support, and making that as diverse as possible as well.
Great. And so, Thea, you started off in short films as kind of like most people do, and I'd like to. Oh no, I've gone a bit further. Where did your stories begin, actually? And what kind of like brought you toward filmmaking? What inspired it? And that's kind of for both of you, actually, because it's obviously not a simple path into this industry. So yeah, what were your beginnings of storytelling?
My early beginnings, that my mum would probably say, it was like I used to make up stories with my little toys by myself in my bedroom. I was the only child, and so I just used to spend hours in there. I used to name like every single little plastic toy I had and just spend hours creating stories for them. And then as I got older, I was like always in plays, in school plays and all of that stuff. And then it was always very acting based, and I studied drama and I wanted to be an actor, and that was like my one track mind in terms of my in for storytelling. And I guess as I got older and people around me were making stuff, I would help them create the story for a music video, for example. This was all pre-consciousness of of filmmaking, and then I didn't have an agent, and so I started to act on screen with my peers, so that we kind of had material, like showreel material, which was really my intention as to why I started to actually make films, and I then realized that, oh, maybe I should explore this other this other element of the craft that I am now being, I guess, celebrated for. So I kind of fell into it that way. It was through my passion for acting.
And how about you, Sophie?
Quite similar, only child. There must be something in that. I read a lot. I was a voracious reader. Like, I just read. Stories. Similarly acted out, like, stuff with teddy bears, and everyone had a different character and a different story. And then I think when I ended up being like and also a failed actor, did a lot of youth drama. I think for working class kids, that is the way in. It's like there seems to be much more grassroots acting groups for kids that don't know anything about the industry. So that was my way in. Then I went to uni and I didn't get a part in any of the plays, and I was like, it shattered my illusions. And then I actually directed theatre at uni, and then ended up, I mean, that's more my way into producing. But basically, along the whole way, I wanted to get into film and TV, but I didn't know how or why. And I was an SA, and I just loved the energy of the set and all of that. So yeah, it just was similar to Thea, I'd say.
It sounds like it was about just getting that early exposure just to being on set and seeing how it runs. And
I marvelled at being on set, and I still do, like, that kick just never leaves me, where, like, it's like an orchestra that just everyone's doing these amazing things all at the same time. I think it's a total marvel to watch, and I just wanted to get involved in some capacity, basically.
My first proper on-set experience was I did work experience on the first season of Peaky Blinders, and I was with the AD department, and but at that time I still just only wanted to be an actor, but I was like, yeah, again, like, the marvel at what set is, like, it's so smoke and mirrors before you actually step foot onto, like, a real one. Before that, I had just been on, like, web series type shoots, but, like, to be on Peaky Blinders with these massive actors and this massive set and crew, I was literally like, what? This is crazy. And actually seeing what the director does and doesn't do, like, I think my opinion, my expectation of directing before that point was, like, I guess actually what the AD's job is, you know, like, you have this idea that the director is running around and doing everything and telling everyone what to do, and actually they're, like, very calm, sitting down behind a monitor. And I always used to look at
action.
Exactly. And I just remember always being like, and every now and then someone would bring him a hot drink, and I just look at him as, like, this being in the corner, like, what? Who is that guy? Like, who is the director? And I think I learned so much from that experience. I remember when I left that experience, I got really good references from it, from Tiger Aspect. And the second AD was like to me, oh, you have, like, really good directing instincts. I was like, nah, that's not what I want to do. And then, obviously he foresaw something before I did.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of, like, again, like, pre-conscious influence that I guess takes hold of you. And I think now, like, we're both, me and Sophie are now both parents, and I think you do recognize that through parenting, like, things that your child is not really conscious of, but that you can kind of see, oh, this is planting some seeds for later on down the line, and I think that's what a lot of it was for me.
Thea, you had a journey of making, loads of short films, and I'd like to know what do you think you were trying to express at that time? And, looking back with your perspective now, how do you view those initial short films serving the journey that you're on now creatively? At
first, I was like, the first short films I was making, I kind of, like, fit them around poetry. At the time, like, I was doing lots of spoken word and, like open mic nights and stuff, and people kind of knew me for that as well, and so I kind of merged the two. My intention at first was to build a story around whatever the story of the poem was, and then as I became more intentional with it, I really was just interested in telling stories like from the community perspective that I grew up in. Like Importance of Skin was shot in the estate I grew up in, and it was just really, it's always been a big part, like community's always been a massive part of my life, and especially I think being an only child, like you do find siblings in your friends, and I think I was interested in how like people from where I'm from were processing grief at a certain age, because you know people had lost their lives for different reasons, and people were experiencing different levels of trauma, and like what does that look like for a 19-year-old or an 18-year-old, or I think I was interested in that. And then losing my dad at 21, and I guess then exploring that grief through short films, I think definitely is what happened with Eli. And The Importance of Skin is about grief too, I guess. So yeah, I think I've always been interested in how resilient young people are from certain backgrounds, and how beautiful their stories are, and can be despite their circumstances.
Do you think that it's something that helps in healing? Because, you know, I'm similar to you in that sense that, you know, I was in my teens when I experienced grief, and it's something that has constantly governed my day-to-day. And do you think that like channeling that through your creativity was kind of like a process of you like managing it?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think it's from an intentional place though. I don't think it's like I'm gonna write this film so that I can process grief. I think that's just what happens as an artist, you know. Even if no one ever sees it, you might write a poem, or you might do a really long journal entry, or you might, I don't know, film something that you're never gonna release. And I think it's the catharticism of art when your brain kind of, that is your instinct to create something as an artist, is definitely how we all process our emotions. And I think, as we all know, that usually happens. It happens more often for sadder emotions than happy emotions. You're more inclined to make something when you feel sad than when you feel happy. And I think it is a natural instinct in all of us, like artists or not, to want to find that output. And in doing that, you then inadvertently process it, because you have to lean into it more, you have to understand it more, you have to maybe write characters or write a novel or whatever it may be, or paint a massive canvas, you know, that's kind of forced you to think about how you feel more directly.
Great, thank you.
You touched on about the importance of relationships there. So it's a question for both of you, but what do you think the importance are of short films in terms of your development journey, but also it'd be good for you to talk about the relationships that are forged along the way and the importance of those as well.
Yeah, I mean, I made a lot of shorts before I made my first TV show, and that was all I had to show for my producing skills. I hadn't come up for a production company or under a producer, and I think that's quite rare that I was given that opportunity based on my short film work. But I think as a producer of short films, you're doing everything, and you're actually line producing, which I've never had any interest in doing, and it is a real baptism of fire. And I think if you still want to produce after that, you actually do want to produce. So it's a good litmus test of whether it's something you want to do. And I did form great relationships with the directors that I worked with, and also sort of HODs and casting directors. And then when you're doing longer form stuff that can actually pay people, it's great to be able to bring them onto the job. Like we had, for example, Oliver Cronk, who was our amazing costume designer on Surviving Earth. I'd done a short film with him. And the same with Eleanor, actually, our production designer. I think she had a separate relationship with you, Thea, but like there's people on Surviving Earth that I had done short films with that we were able to bring on, which was great.
Yeah, and obviously Olan for me had shot all of my short films, so that was a really long-standing relationship, and one that we had both grown through, like in our narrative progression. So yeah, it was, I think, shorts also, like which Sophie mentioned about having to line produce and having to do multiple jobs, like you learn so much so quickly, and it does equip you for when you are in a feature, and where maybe you can see that there's a gap that's not being filled, and where you do have a understanding of other roles so that you can better work with those people, and yeah, all of that. So I think it's like film school, right, without film school. And I think it is just a massive like lesson in learning by doing, and it's invaluable really, as you progress through your career, I think.
And watching Thea and Olan work together is like a thing of absolute beauty. I don't think we went into overtime barely at all that whole shoot, and that was so much down to like that collaboration, long-term collaboration they had, and having such an effective shorthand. And I think you guys were also so resourceful. Like, you just shot and you still made it look beautiful with not that much. We're in so many locations. And I think all of that is from your short film experience together.
Yeah, I think also because we know each other's tastes so well. So it's like we don't have to go for, like, there's just an assurance in, like, I don't know, let's say by the fourth or fifth take, for example. It's like we don't need to do more, like, to be sure, unless obviously another department has to go for another one. But between us, in terms of what we're looking for, we both know when we have it, which again is that shorthand that comes from lots of experience working together.
When people are starting out or in whatever field, they can look upwards a bit, and people who are sort of like already in and almost you're wanting to be lifted up into it with them, but that's kind of not how it usually works. Like, people who are up there, they're just up there with their friends as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's about like finding new people around you. And I watched Run earlier actually, and which is a film you shot with Olan. Yeah, so it's like super early career for you, and it had like a really nice loose energy to it, which I found like really intoxicating to watch. So this is a really tricky question to crystallize as it pertains to like voice in cinema. But after making Run, how did you find navigating your ideas through like a more rigorous process as you scaled upwards? So it would be like the process of working with like funding, execs and producers and actors, all this sort of things. Like, how did you go about sort of keeping yourself in it?
I think it does come from having those anchors that you continually work with and who have worked with you from the beginning to remind you of why you came up with the idea in the first place, and why it's important to tell it from this perspective, and why, you know, we should still try to work in a certain way because that's what we know gets the result that we want. And I think like when you do stop working with, when you filter out those people, when you kind of end up by yourself, it's really hard. It does get really hard to maintain, I think, like your confidence with it. It's not so much your sense of self or that you lose who you are or anything like that. It's more like having those people, having that positive echo chamber to remind you what you're doing and your reasons why. And I think like I did like Film London and Eli was my first experience at Notes or working with a financier or anything like that. And I think the producers on that, we weren't like totally on the same page. And I think I learned very quickly then what that relationship should and shouldn't be like moving forward. And so I think it's all lessons, and it all makes things more clear as you progress, I guess. And like even in the edit for Surviving Earth, when things were being challenged, like I can't remember specifics, but like Olan came to the edit one day, and then when we were questioning things, he was like, but why is that a problem? Like, why? That is why you wrote it, and you are the daughter of him, and it is from your like lens, you know. And so I think just hearing that sometimes from someone who is an old collaborator can be really.
And did you have a role in that as well, Sophie? Because that's oftentimes the case, isn't it? Of trying to preserve the intention of what you're setting out to do together.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, a lot, like, that is our whole job, right? As producers, is like best facilitating that creative process. And I think like the juiciest part for producing for me is actually in the edit, and it's kind of incredible what you can do. And you do need those level of external eyes. So like the producer is the first one, right? The director and the editor have been working really closely together, and you're watching cuts and you see things that perhaps the directors and the editors don't see. And then you bring in the execs and they see things that you haven't seen because you've watched it like 15 times by that point. But Alex was the other producer. I don't want to speak for Thea, but I feel like we had a really honest collaboration, and I think that really worked. Like, we don't hate each other by the end of this process. It's been like years now, which I think is rare. Like, a lot of debut producer director collaborations break down, and I think, you know, it's about honesty. It's about the execs might give you notes and you don't agree with, but you sort of you explore them, and then you work out why they don't work, and then you are able to articulate why that doesn't work. And then other times they give notes and they do make it better. And I think it was a long edit process, wasn't it, Thea?
12 or 14 weeks.
Compared to TV is loads. And the whole thing was like, we took stuff out because we thought we didn't want it, and we actually made another problem and realized that wasn't the issue in the first place. And then we reinstated scenes, and there was so much of that. I guess fine-tuning, playing around with it, and I think we took a scene out, Thea, didn't we? And then it was actually Film4 or BFI that were like, that scene is really, really important for the whole story. Like, that's like, and we were like, oh yeah, and we were trying to fix something by removing something, but that wasn't the solution to it. So it is. Especially the edit is so collaborative, and it is really useful. And I think the job of a producer is you're sort of intermediator, aren't you? And it's like knowing what protecting the director's vision, but also recognizing the experience and skills of execs. And like sometimes both are right, sometimes both are wrong, and it's all just about collaborating, seeing what works. And I think we were really fortunate on this. I think we were all on the same page, and everyone boosted it and supported Thea's vision. But I'm speaking for Thea there. But yeah, it felt like a very healthy collaboration.
I agree in terms of the vision being supported, definitely. Having supportive producers who understand who you are on the same page with, and it means that you have more than just yourself to fight in your corner, especially at that stage in the edit, because like your heads of department are kind of, you know, they're gone, and
your backup's gone.
Yeah, your backup's gone, and it's like you and the editor, and yeah, so having producers who still wanted to maintain the intention was really important.
And also Thea is like an amazing collaborator, and quite, I wouldn't say rare, but from my perspective, a lot of the most effective directors are the ones that are willing to collaborate, but also it wasn't trying to. I think sometimes directors can try and control everything so much they almost strangle it, and Thea was so collaborative, but very, very fixed on her vision, but in a collaborative way. And so when there were suggestions that you were open to, a lot of them, you were like, yeah, let's go. And then when you pushed back Thea, or when Thea pushed back, everyone listened, because it was like, no, this actually really does mean something. And I think, yeah, once Thea pushed back on something, we all were like, okay, because it wasn't a consistent thing. Sometimes you can work with directors and they're just constantly pushing back for the sake of pushing back, and then it doesn't mean anything. But with Thea, it really did. And so I think Thea was able to really know what was important and what wasn't, and kept a very fixed gaze on her vision throughout the whole process as well, which made it a lot easier.
So at what point did you decide, from those shorts, from doing Eli and Run and etc., did you decide to make the leap to doing a feature film? And what were your first steps? And then the other piece is, the third bit of that is, and at what point did you two join? Did your paths converge and join?
I think the need to do a feature was more led by the story that I wanted to tell, more than I think because I didn't come into filmmaking in I want to be a filmmaker way. So my drive and my career progression didn't look clear to me like that. I didn't really think I'm going to be a short filmmaker and then I'm going to make a feature in that way. So I think it was really led and driven by the story. And the story couldn't be a short, I guess. And so I guess through my short films, I was then ready to tell a bigger story also. So there was a sense of readiness, and also just the sense of the importance of that story particularly. And I think the more I spoke about my dad's journey in a general capacity, the more I realized it was it was bigger than just a family story. I think there were universal themes that I realized were important to share. And that's when I met my other producer, Alexandra, and she's also from the Balkans. And so we had that connection of understanding this story about our fathers, and men of a certain age from that part of the world. And then a bit later down the line, we brought Sophie on.
Yeah, I think I was brought on. I don't know why I was brought on. I think part of it was to do with Alex Bilic had produced documentaries up until that point, hadn't done scripted. So I think she felt the need to bring somebody on that had that experience. Yeah, I had met Thea. I'd known Alex. I read the script. It was official first draft stage, I guess. And I don't think BFI had developed it, but it was sort of at that late stage development where we were thinking about bringing on the casting director was already on, but no one had been attached. And that's when I was brought on. Yeah, and I read the script and I loved it, and I loved him, and I thought he was the most complex, beautifully, accurately depicted person that had addiction issues that I had ever read or seen on screen. So that's why I came on.
And what was that sort of development journey like? Because sometimes you can get notes that might not align with what you feel's right. So how did the story shift from the initial idea to what we eventually saw on screen? And we kind of came across this because when we had Thomas on back in the day on this podcast, and he was talking about, I think at one point you two were parallel on some scheme together, on a feature scheme together, I think maybe way back. And he was saying that you were in development for a long time with this at different things. So can you talk to us about that sort of journey? Because this has been in development for a long time, right?
Yeah. Since the end of 2018, it was in development for. And it changed, I think it changed creatively most at the beginning when it was about perspective and whose perspective to tell it from. So the story has pretty much been similar, the same. We did have one big rewrite, which I'll get into in a second, but it's pretty much been the same type of arc. But at the beginning, it was a question of perspective and who's to tell it from. I had initially done a really early draft from the daughter's perspective, not the whole, and not like the whole draft, but like my early writings and my early scenes were from the daughter's perspective, and then it kind of was split, so it would jump between the two. And then through the iFeature scheme, which we got onto in 2019, I was really encouraged to kind of hone in on one or the other, which I remember initially like not necessarily agreeing with. I felt like I could have a split perspective, and why can't I have a split perspective? But the further we went on the scheme, I guess I listened, and I decided on telling it from his perspective because that was more interesting to me. And so then from that point, it did pretty much stay very similar to what you see, other than we kind of had to change the music thread a bit, so that it became more of a like active goal. In the draft before, they were, I can't even remember now what they were doing with the band before we rewrote it, but basically we just had to make it a bit more active so that Vlad's goal was not just an interior goal, it was also kind of like an exterior goal through the band, and that kind of helped anchor that thread of the story. So that was the biggest change, but as I said, yeah, creatively and intentionally, I think all the other arcs pretty much maintained themselves on a macro scale.
No, I was just going to say that big rewrite was also, I think, probably, it was about the music storyline, but it was about making it, I guess, removing it further away from what happened in real life and giving it that sort of natural story arc that you expect to see in a film. And I think Thea was able to retain the soul of it, especially the soul of Vlad, but it had more of a first act, second act, third act, satisfying structure, I guess.
Were there any moments throughout production? Because I mean, you said it came through in 2018. We started in 2018, sorry. So that's a long old process. Were there any moments along the way where it was supposed to happen one year and then it didn't, or any moments where you felt like it may not happen? Because it'd just be useful to hear, because we kind of get a mixture of people come on who are either going through that journey or got on a note at the end of that journey or whatever it is. So it'd be good to know, your actual journey within that process.
I think we applied for production finance once before the one that we got, right? And that's when we got given the screen test, no? Yeah, so we applied for production finance through BFI. We'd already Film4 had already said yes to their half, and then we applied for production finance through BFI, and they basically didn't say no, but they didn't say yes.
They wanted to see more.
They wanted to see more, so we had to go away and do so they basically commissioned a screen test, which was, I guess, a proof of concept-y type of thing. Like the intention of that screen test also changed because our execs had changed. It was like three scenes, that we could choose. And I remember initially the note was about like the live music aspects, but then that exec left, and so that then didn't.
There was no music in that test.
No, I know, that's what I mean. But when we first got told we had to make a test, the exec who was the exec at the time, I remember receiving the note about, oh, how would Thea direct like the live music scenes? And I was a bit like, what? When it was time to actually shoot the scenes, that was no longer like the contention, and so we kind of just used it as what we wanted, and we used it as an opportunity to I guess rehearse our lead cast, and as an opportunity for me and Olan to kind of just find our cinematic language. And it was frustrating at the time, but in hindsight, it was like a really great opportunity to have been given and to have been able to answer a lot of those questions that we would have only been facing during prep. We kind of answered them, 6 months early. We shot the screen test the same year we shot the film, but it was at the beginning of the year. And then we reapplied for production finance, and we were awarded it in June of 2023. and then we shot in October of 2023. So it was quite a fast turnaround from that point. But yeah, we did have to go back and reapply, I guess.
And just copy and paste all our answers from the January. No, but I think also, like, it's been really amazing to watch Thea's progression as a filmmaker. And I think, like, you know, the biggest thing I say to to directors and writers is that it's not a race, it's a marathon. Do you know what I mean? And like each step leads to the next, And I think you can like visibly see the progression from Thea's shorts to the screen test to the film, and I think it made the film much better. And also we had our cast, so I think like screen tests are probably quite pointless without your actual cast, and we had our leads, so we could show their dynamic. And you know, Slavko his performance is so central to this whole film, and we were able to show that as well. So I think all of those things really helped. And
then, so you were greenlit off the back of that. What was that process like? The greenlight process, and yeah, also to combine it with the next one is I guess when you've been working away for years and years and years and years and years, this hypothetical film that you're like trying to bring into reality, and then suddenly like you get the yes that is happening, then what happens?
It was funny because that greenlight day, I was actually with Olan, which is crazy. We were just out, we had coffee, we were having a nice day with some other friends. And I looked at my phone, and Farhana, our exec at FILM4, had texted us like, have you guys check your email? And the email had gone to Alex, I think. And Alex was like asleep or something. I don't know what. Or she wasn't looking at the phone. So we were all like,
what does that mean?
We were literally like, we were texting, Alex, wake up, check your email. Like, what does it say? Because I think at that point, even though we had a hint, it's like you just don't believe it until you see it, because of the whole journey you've been through, and like the yes and the no's and the maybes you've already been through. None of us were willing to like accept that it was true until we saw this email. And then literally Alex came back, like, it was definitely over an hour later. She was like, oh, sorry guys.
Yeah, I think didn't they have like the BFI have a technical fault where maybe that was another very important email.
No, I think it was. No, I just, yeah, you just reminded me of that actually. There was something going on.
I think there was a technical fault with BFI that didn't land, and the one where we didn't, I don't know, it might have been a festival announcement that Alex was asleep for, but we might have mixed them up. But getting the green light was amazing. I did have a 5-month-old baby, so I did feel quite sick about the whole process as well.
About having to do a film whilst having a baby, you mean?
Yeah, just the timings of that felt. Yeah, there was something else I was going to say that I've totally forgotten.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's all right.
I think the green light was like, yeah, it was very surreal, because it's like, okay, now we have to go and do it. And then I guess it's like, okay, cool, like, yeah, now what? What do we do? And then we have only July, August, 3 months. Basically, we only have 3 months to pull this together and be ready to shoot a whole feature. And that feels like quite overwhelming, but it's also kind of like, you know, the burden of all you've ever dreamed for now. You have to deal with it. So it's like, it was that feeling. And I guess, I can't remember what we did first. We just went into more casting, didn't we?
Yeah. I mean, we had a lot to cast.
Yeah, we had a lot to cast. So I think we then just delved into casting and all of that stuff, locations. We were back and forth from Bristol, doing recce's before we actually like moved there for proper prep. And I think the good part again of the screen test is that we had Eleanor, our production designer, also designed the screen test. So we had all of those boards, everything was already there. It had a starting point anyway. Obviously they all added to their work, but we already had this genesis of that the departments knew. kind of the starting point and the example of that, and what we liked about it, what we didn't, what we wanted to change. And so I think that did definitely help fast track the creative conversations, that otherwise would have just been happening from scratch within those 3 months.
It did feel like winning the X Factor though, because it was the first round of the BFI Discovery Award, which is like they select 6 to interview and only 2 get it. And we knew all the other 6 teams, and like it was a whole panel. Do you remember that whole meeting? It was like everyone in the BFI, it almost like pitching to Parliament, and then everyone had to collectively decide it. So like I feel like the stakes just got higher and higher and higher, and we were like, okay, we know we're like the last 6. And I think it was euphoric for sure.
Why do you think that something like that got chosen amongst all the slates, right? Because like you said, it's the X Factor, right? So by that point, it doesn't mean that the other 6 weren't good, but
No.
in order to try and select, the last 2, does it become like a lottery thing? Because as filmmakers, we pour so much of our emotion and our lives into our work, and it's hard to take rejection not as personal, albeit for a few minutes or a few days or a year, depending on who you are. So what do you feel like institutions might be looking for with the projects, and why you think that they greenlit this?
You're totally right. It's so easy to take it personally as a filmmaker, and I'm now like exec producing at Channel 4 and on the side of commissioning, and you realise it's about that much of it is to do with like the creative vision, and the rest is like what else you're making, what else you have on your slate, if there's any crossover with something you've made before. And I think in our pitch we really emphasised the role of music in the film, which I think was set us apart from everyone else. We're obviously an incredibly charismatic and dynamic trio. We're free working class women. I think like people probably rooted for that as well, and just like Thea's very, very authentic and singular vision, boosted by music, boosted by a really great cast. I think, how could you say no to it?
It's cool though, also in terms of like the note that you received around like creating that engine through the live music, and then it becomes a big part of your pitch, which helps you stand out.
100%, and you can't hear the music on the page, so I think we were just really like, this is a music film. This is not like, obviously the subject matter is really hard and tough, but like none of us wanted to make a depressing, like dreary. So I mean, our film has been described as social realism, but there was something that we wanted to elevate out of that space, because I think that's because it's Thea's real life story, and often like these stories are told from somebody from the outside. It's like quite voyeuristic, but actually when you're in the inside of addiction, these situations, working class lives, it's not black and white. There's colour, there's other stuff going on, and I think like Thea have communicated that really effectively as well.
So the relationship between the director and the DP is obviously an incredibly important one. And I've said to you a couple of times now that I came across your work, I think probably back in 2018 when I worked with Olan myself on my first short, and it was such a lovely experience, and we really, really clicked. And you've been working with Olan since, and I wanted to know why you think Olan has been the right person to collaborate, time and time again on a creative level, but also how important it is that on a personal, human level that you both understand each other. I remember one of the things me and him clicked on, like we were both fathers and we had more than one kid, and when we were working like that, really, because our story at the time was about that, and we really gelled, and we both came from other careers and we were moving into film, so there was so much more and we really got on. So I just wanted to know, just want to dig a little bit more into that, because as Sophie said earlier on, that watching them both work together was fascinating in trying to meet the schedule and do all these other things, because there was a shorthand presence.
We just like lucked out really with each other's sensibilities. I think like where I would put the camera is where Olan puts it, and that is like the best way to describe it, really. So there isn't much redirection that I have to give him, and it's just always been like that. So however I would take a photo is obviously he can do it better than me, but it's very similar to where my natural, like how I see frames. We have a very similar viewpoint on like a frame and framing and what we find interesting or intentional, where someone could be in a frame, and all of those things were just similar from the beginning. And so I think then you get used to that. And so then I remember working with another DP who's great on like a student film, and that didn't exist. And I was like, okay, now I have to work a lot harder to be like, no, that's not right. No, I think I don't like that. I prefer this, and blah. And then I realized then anyway, that it was like, you see the relationship, right? And what it has, versus, your work with another, really great artist. But it's just that serendipity that just happened. I didn't know at the time until it was happening. And then I just think his work and his dedication to it, and his understanding of tone, or the tone that my cinematic voice just always elevates it, and we're able to elevate each other when we work together. And I think, just that trust that's then continued to build is then really hard. That I just don't have a reason to choose another person, basically. You know what I mean? I don't have a reason, really. And I think there's not, like, across genre, I don't even have to have seen him do it to know that he's capable of doing it, So I think that's another part of it, because he technically hadn't shot a feature that like Surviving Earth at that point, but I didn't need to see that to know that he was capable. So yeah, it was just a bit of luck, really, in terms of how we met and our tastes being so similar. And then I guess over the years our friendship groups are similar in like our work in friendship groups, and so I think then you create friendships outside of work and all of that.
So you've been greenlit and you're looking at the script. What were the things that you were most worried about being able to execute? I mean, we've mentioned the music a few times, but yeah, so you've got like these music and crowd work scenes and things like that. So what was it about the story that you were kind of most worried about putting into action?
Definitely crowd scenes were, I think I thought about more because I'd never done crowd scenes. But then actually when you get there, it's kind of like the AD's job. They deal with the crowd. So it was kind of like, okay. But I think, crowd scenes are a lot. I guess I would walk into unit base, and if it was a crowd day, there was so many essays there, and I'd be like, oh my God, all of these people are here for this film. This is crazy. And it can be like quite overwhelming. And I think then, like, Olan actually reminded me on some days where I was finding it difficult, he would come up to me and like we'd talk or we'd rant about something, and he'd be like, that's not your job, like, that, don't worry about that, or don't worry about this, or like if the set dressing wasn't right or whatever, I'd feel like, oh, that's my oversight, like that's my fault that I haven't done this. And he'd come to me and be like, that's not on you, like that's not on you. The reason why this isn't in the frame isn't because of you. Do you know what I mean? And so I think, again, it goes back to what we were saying earlier, having those people who know you and know how you work, and therefore understand that whatever shortcoming in that moment, it could be your fault, but when it isn't, they can tell you that it isn't. I think is like super important for like your debut, or for any work that you do, but particularly your debut. And yeah, I think the producers also felt confident that Olan could support me in that. And also I hadn't done live music, but also again, that process is like the music director's job to like figure all of those puzzles out. in terms of like what's being recorded, what can we hear on set, what we can't hear on set. Like all of that was not my responsibility. And that is the beauty of collaboration, that you can trust your departments and then come together to create the whole.
We've talked about how much you've had to interrogate a story for years before making it, and then suddenly you've got these like 20-something days to shoot it and discover and capture what it actually is. And obviously taking the idea that, you make the film 3 times in pre-production, production and post-production, what did you learn about the story as you were making it? Because it'd be kind of good to understand your perspective, and also that your actors brought to the story too. Because when you were in Manchester, you said this thing and it stayed with me, and I even texted Marcus about it. You said, when you were working with Ola and you were questioning every frame, like, is it French enough? And I was like, I need to know more about what she meant by that, rather than just, does a frame look a frame for the sake of a frame? So I'd like you to elaborate on that.
Well, the is it French enough thing kind of just kept to go piggyback off what Sophie said earlier about us wanting to elevate it away from social realism. It was like me and Olan had these set of rules that we came up with in prep that then became our rule book for every scene that we shot, and one of them was that is it French enough, which is like a half joke, but it also just kept us on the straight and narrow, and we could also say it to other people, be like, nah, it's not French enough, nah, it's looking to this or it's looking to that. So it just was kind of like a phrase that we used to make sure that we were always trying as best as we could to elevate it from that kind of British social realism point of view. I forgot the first part of your question.
It was just about, what did you discover?
I learned a lot more about my dad, I think, through this process, and about men like him, and about how we relate to our own lives and the people around us. I think in writing a character like that on the page, I feel quite honoured that I knew the real person, and then I also know this version of him, and like how the qualities in those people and what that uncovers for you as the author of that character. And I think I think I became even less judgmental I was never judgmental really, but I became even less so through making the film. And also just like on set, the amount of crew that would come up to me at different stages and like ask for a hug and say that they finally felt safe enough to express their own personal relationship to the story, for example. And I think that is what is important when we make stuff like this, because you create a community and you create a family, and hopefully along the way, like there's parts of your story that does do that.
Yeah, I think we also relearned a few things, like the perspective question early on. Whose perspective is it? Is it Maria and Vlad? One of our biggest edit notes that we got when we delivered the first edit to Film4 and BFI was, this feels too dual again. Like this, there was a lot. The shot choices weren't, I guess, favouring Vlad as much as they could have done. And then the biggest thing we did to the film in the edit was like refocus it right back on Vlad through shot choices, which I think was interesting because it was always in the script, but then sometimes you can get a little bit lost in the edit, and that really, really helped the film, I think.
I was going to ask what you discovered about the film as well, Sophie, from going through the process.
Maybe I was naive. I think the tragedy of it hit me much more in the edit than maybe at script and production stage. Maybe because you've got some distance to it, but it's dealing with a lot of tough things, which I think I underestimated right when I was in the process. It still has the music and all of that stuff, but I think bringing somebody into that role of Vlad, and with Slavko doing what he did with it, and because he is so charming and so likable. Actually, the dark side of it feels darker, and I don't think I appreciated that on the page. You really do make the story in the edit, and I think sometimes you can we had actually a lot more than we needed, and I think there was like tough decisions about what we got rid of and what we cut. I think I learned the importance of the edit more than, you know, having produced TV where you have about a third of the time, to like the finessing and the crafting and the shaving off seconds, how it can completely transform a story. And we brought in a consultant editor, Mick Audsley, and like some of the things that it completely transformed the edit again, and they were such small changes, but it honestly elevated it by, I'd say, like another 20-30%. And they were small things, and they were like very simple questions, like where are we in this scene, like geographically, where are we, like things that we completely had taken for granted because we knew the story so well. So yeah, the edit process was like a proper learning curve for me in this.
I have a follow-up question. When you were just talking about, Sophie, that you kind of the tragedy of it hit you. So, Thea, I want to know, like, when you're on set, right, as a director, obviously you have to be so in tune to the sort of like emotional thread that you've laid into the script, and you have to sort of like direct from that when you're in. Obviously, it's in your prep, but you've got to kind of like direct from that, and you've got to be so conscious of it when you're watching it on the monitor. Did that not unearth a lot of that kind of like grief that you had, and how did you sort of like? I'm talking about your well-being on set, because, you know, sometimes when you see a scene, it does hit you, and it can make you cry and stuff like that. Like, I've been there, and no one else might feel it because you can see the whole thing stitched in your head and edited together, and you feel the impact of what that scene is going to do. How did you manage that side of yourself and still sort of like think, I've got a schedule to meet, I've got to get this film in the can, but I've still got to be in tune with this grief that's been following me around for years?
I think I just cried when I wanted to cry, really, and just carried on directing through it. Like we were very, I don't see crying in that way. I think there was the one time I cried out of like, not emotion, not like grief, it was like out of, I guess, not feeling good enough, was like on one of the crowd days, and it was like way more out of frustration. And on that day I didn't want anyone to see me cry, I think, because it came from a different place. It came from like a confidence place, and then the cast made me feel better and wrote a little note on my monitor which made me cry again. But other than that day, whenever I cried out of like the emotional beats of the film and out of personal experience, I never felt a lack of confidence through it. I just kind of was like, this is sad and it's making me cry, and I think it's a beautiful thing that, you know, the actors and everyone's jobs have come together to create this work that can create empathy in you, even at this stage. Like, it's so raw, like it's literally just actors and camera, and, you know, that's it. There's no edit, there's no music. We're literally watching it straight through the cans, through the monitor, and it's still evoking emotions. And not just me, like other people would cry as well. And I think, but what I found most interesting was it wasn't the sad scenes that made me cry. It was like some of the, I mean, they're still, I guess, sad, but it wasn't like the scenes that I guess everyone else maybe were emotionally prepping me for were not the ones that necessarily made me the most upset. I think there's a scene in the cafe when they're talking to each other, and that brought me to tears, which I was never expecting until I literally watched them act it. And it was just in their performances and in the things that weren't being said that I felt like such heartache for them as characters and for their relationship and for so many other people in the world in different circumstances. If it's love, if it's grief, if it's whatever, that those things that you don't say and how much damage that does. And I think I just felt so sad for them and for Vlad in that moment, and obviously then for the real person behind the character, and like how he may have felt in these moments where you can't speak. So yeah, that was that. And then I guess the other really sad scene I remember filming was the phone call the scene where they get the news, I think that made a lot of people upset. Yeah, and we only did two takes, actually. I think we had it in the first one, and then I didn't want to do it again. There's only so many times you can shoot that and still maintain its punch, I think. So I didn't want to overshoot it, but we did another angle just of coverage for Maria's character, and I kind of knew I was never going to use it. I always wanted it in the one shot in the wide, but we did that, and then that was it, really. I think that day was a hard day. Yeah, I think also because the actors hadn't heard, so they had the other end of the phone call was in their in-ears, so they hadn't ever heard it. They hadn't heard the performance of the other actors on the other side of the phone, so it genuinely made them cry as we were filming them and as they were acting. So I think it was like an all-round emotional moment. Yeah, for them listening to it for the first time, in real time, which is also why I didn't want to reshoot it, because it was like that was their real reactions to hearing the recording.
And Sophie, what's your role in this and kind of managing that on set, knowing the subject matter? And
I think as an industry, we've become much more conscientious about mining filmmakers for trauma and like the responsibility we have when a filmmaker is telling a story that is so personal. So working with BFI and Film4, we had to have somebody for well-being on set, and we also had a well-being pot of money. And I think, you know, we all have like a close relationship. I have personal experience. My dad was also had lots of addiction issues and died quite early in life when I was young. So I think both the personal and also having the infrastructure behind us, like if Thea ever needed like to talk to a therapist, there was money for it. I think we probably thought that being on set would be the most triggering, but actually you never know when. And you know, the BFI kept being like, do we return the money? And I kept saying, no, we're not returning that money until like everything is done, not even delivering the film. I mean, like, it was like doing interviews could be really triggering. The release of the film could be really triggering. You don't know at what point it becomes difficult. So we've kept on to that money, and I think me and Alex at every stage are incredibly aware of how this could become difficult at any moment for Thea.
Yeah, and it's a good point actually, because people do ask like crazy questions in Q&As, and like I think obviously once you put your art into the world, there's a massive sense of entitlement that some people feel to your work and to the topics and to where they sit in their own experience in relation to what you've made. And you know, I think it brings up so much in so many people, and you just don't know. At any point someone could ask a question that I'm like, oh, now I'm gonna go home and think about that all night, or whatever. And so I think, and also I guess, I don't know, maybe when the film is actually, the release is over, I don't know, maybe I'll get a mad sense of overwhelm. Now where does the grief go? Do you know what I mean? I don't know. I have no idea. I'm just speaking off top. But yeah, as Sophie said, which I actually didn't consider until you just said it, it's very true. Like, we just don't know what or when things may arise.
But I do like a quarterly check-in, don't I, Thea, where I'm like, we've got money for therapy if you need it. And you're always like, no.
She does always remind me that it's there. Also, usually when I'm crying about something else, she's like, by the way, we have this. I'm like, oh yeah, okay. But you know, I will take up. I think it's just great to do. Also, sometimes you don't know that you need to talk until you talk, you know? Like, I feel very fine. I feel very used to discussing the themes of the film and what happened and whatever else because I've had to. But sometimes until you actually are in a session, you realize, oh gosh, I needed that. so much.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a great benefit that there's able to be a line in the budget for that.
And on that as well, Sophie, because I think at the BFI preview screening the other night, you were introduced on stage with your co-director, who's your little boy Nova. Because I mean, we always ask guests who are parents like how you balance life as a parent in this industry, and yeah.
I mean, we throughout the whole process of this, 4 children were born. Alex has got 2, Thea's got 1, I've got 1. We were all pregnant and gave birth, and I think like working with other mothers is really important because they get it. My baby was the youngest during shooting, so the beauty of working in film and when you've got multiple producers is that Alex was able to take the lead in prep and production, and then I led on the post, which did make it like much more manageable for me. I think it is really hard to work in this industry as a parent, and it has made me re-look at what I do and how I do it. I'm not prepared to miss out on my child's life over work. So that's a constant juggle. And I don't think it's changed that much for women. And yeah, I mean, Alex and Thea both, for 5 weeks, you were away from your kids, weren't you? Like Monday to Friday, really tough.
And then also like having to go back on the weekend to visit them in London is also like, okay, we don't get any days off. Like while everyone else is having their weekend to relax, it's like we're going back to see the kids. And like my mum was looking after Nova and for most of the week, and then his dad would have him for a couple of days, and my mum was always like, don't come back this weekend, like you have a moment. And it's like, but you just can't, because then you feel guilty and all the other stuff, and it's just like, well, no, like it's not fair that he doesn't get to see me for 7 days. And I guess if you don't go back that weekend, then it becomes almost 2 weeks that you don't see them, right? Because you have to wait for the following weekend, and so then it's that that happens. And I think I was just so fortunate that my mum had taken early retirement around the time I was pregnant. If she hadn't, I don't know how I would have done it. Like, I don't know who would have looked after him. I don't know. I don't know how it would have been possible. We couldn't get a line in the budget for childcare, so that wasn't an option. So like, I just don't know what I don't know what I would have done. I guess if push came to shove, I would have just had to brought him with me. He was in nursery, so he didn't technically have to be in school, like legally. So I could have done that somehow. I would have just had to figure out what that looked like. But yeah, I don't know, if not for mothers and grandparents at a certain age, what you do. Because there isn't this space, it just doesn't exist in our industry. There isn't, crashes that are readily available. Like it just isn't built into the structure of it. And I think that is heavily based on, how gendered it is towards men. And so it's not a man's issue in the same way. And I think until like that changes, it's gonna be hard, I think.
And there's also a socio-economic level to it, right? Like I know people that make it work because they have loads of money and the partner's freelance, or they can just like take the kids away and do all this stuff. But like, if you're just a normal person, I'm fortunate enough that I've got a partner who equally takes care of the childcare, but he does a 9 to 5. He can't take off 6 weeks to like relocate somewhere. So yeah, we haven't made enough progression in that area at all. And we did really try and do something different with this, but we still weren't able to because of rules about how money is spent and how it can't be spent, which I was quite surprised by.
I wanted to, I know we've got a question there about the edit markers, but I wanted to skip forward because we kind of just alluded to it with Sophie, what you were saying. And about the not necessarily just about yourselves, but from working class backgrounds, right? I mean, whatever the figures were, what 8% of the industry are from working class backgrounds or whatever it is, it's insane. And obviously that work that you did, Sophie, with Lauren and with Helen, that report that you did about producers earning like
$8,000 a year, yeah.
All of that, coupled with the fact that I remember this saying, someone said that the next Steve McQueen could be in Sports Direct, and the way the industry is, they will not be discovered and they'll stay in Sports Direct. How do you guys like sustain yourselves like in a film that's taken so many years to bring to the forefront of the cinema screen? And we're seeing the Q&As now, we're seeing you're getting selected for this, that and the other, but that's the tip of the iceberg. The grind for you to get over there was not an overnight thing.
But also, yeah, if you work out probably what me and Thea both earned across those years per annum, it's like not livable. I think, Thea, do you want to talk about how you survive, and then I'll talk about how I do?
I mean, at the time, I was living at home, so I guess again, it's like if you happen to be born in London, then you can stay at your family's house if you contribute to the mortgage or the rent, then fine. Or sometimes you don't have to. Whatever the setup is, I guess being from London is a privilege in that sense, if this is where you want to be. And obviously so many filmmakers now are not from London, and they have to rent from a very early stage in their career. So I didn't have the rent issue at that point, so my money could stretch a bit further at the time. But I also obviously had a newborn, and I had to apply for like the statutory maternity pay through my self-employment, and it got declined the first time, and I had to appeal it, as an example of like, on top of the not that much money that you get from script development, like it's not a lot at all on your debut anyway. I don't know how it progresses, but so like that combined with some maternity pay, for example, I was still acting, so I had like a decent amount of pay from the acting job I had at BBC Three. This is like early development stuff that was happening alongside it. And then I guess just I was living off savings, and then the savings ran out, I guess, eventually. And then since I've moved out, I've had to do loads of different jobs, like just lots of content stuff for brands. I now work at my friend's restaurant a few nights a week. Universal Credit. It's all of that. Universal Credit like helped me survive, it continues to for rent, like, do you know what I mean, like housing benefit, all of that stuff. If you like now they've changed the childcare age, but at the time with Nova it wasn't in place yet, so I still had to pay significant amount for his nursery place, just stuff like that. But yeah, basically if you qualify for any type of benefit, just don't feel shame about it and get your money from this government, because they're taking enough from us in tax. So whatever you qualify for, just take it, and don't. I think there's like a stigma and a shame at first before you claim for it, but if it can help you on your way, then let it,
I think the amount of people that sign on, there are people that are signing on that have made like amazing films that have premiered at amazing places, and you would never believe that they were signing on. And there's such a vast separation between like perception and reality in terms of all of that stuff. And James McAvoy, I saw a quote recently because he directed his directorial debut, and he was like, now I have to go back to acting to make some money because it didn't make me any money. I mean, there is a real problem, and it's a drum I bang a lot, and I try and do a lot of work in this space about supporting working class people in the industry, and how I personally survived again from London. Now I don't live in London, I realise what a privilege that is. That, I mean, you're already like 50 points ahead, I'd say. And having a parent that was even working class, was able to get on a property ladder in London because it was the 90s, like all of those things massively helped. And I've always done ads, or I produced the TV shows, which literally, you know, I worked for a year and that paid another year. I just made that spread out. I'm used to not like living on that much, and I'm not like a big spender. And I also now have a husband who has a regular wage that isn't massive, but we know that we can cover the bills with that.
Thank you for that and for being so honest. Because it's, people, as we said, people are going to see film in cinema, they're going to see like the reviews and all this stuff. People starting out, they're in a position where they need to like build their path to live sustainably in the industry. And if they're thinking there's going to be this golden pot at this stage, it's kind of not it. So yeah, I think that's really helpful for people that are out there. So thank you. We've just got the final section, which is just a nugget of the week. It's where we just ask our guests for a little bit of inspiration for something which may have inspired you this week. So yeah, I'd like to ask you both, Thea and Sophie, what has inspired you this week?
Mine is actually, usually mine wouldn't be film related actually, but this week it is because I rewatched Moonlight, and I was just floored by it again. Like, I just think that on what I know of the budget at the time and of the type of filmmakers and of the story and of the poetic way in which they strived and managed to tell that story, I think, like, I draw comparisons to our journey and our story, and obviously it's a completely different story, but it's like in terms of the tenderness of masculinity and just what they were able to achieve from it. I just found it really inspiring. Again, for a long time, my wallpaper was like, I had a screenshot of the moment where they won the Oscar and everyone's faces is like this. And I had like them holding up the card like this with Moonlight on it as my screensaver, just as like a reminder that like, yeah, so much is possible beyond your greatest, ideas and beyond your greatest expectations. And so yeah, rewatching Moonlight this week was a really beautiful, inspiring moment. Again, it's the gift that keeps giving.
Gift that keeps giving. What about you, Sophie?
Mine is work related as well. My company ran a lab called Gatecrashers, which was for 10 working class writers with genre ideas, and on Wednesday we had this amazing pitch session where 10 of these super, they're all working class, but like very, very diverse backgrounds, across that as well. And they stood up and they pitched these like massively bold, amazing ideas that took them out of the working class social realism world, and they thought big and they pitched big, and there was a room full of really great industry people. I think we had about 100 people there, and they were all completely energized by it. And that, for me, going back to the class thing, where I just think it's getting harder and harder and harder and harder, that I got a lot of hope and inspiration from what can still be imagined and pitched and supported even when things are really hard.
Yeah, that's incredible. And mine is Love on the Spectrum.
I love Love on the Spectrum.
They're so cool. I was like, I was tearing up at Connor going to his nan's grave. It's like so lovely, and all the new characters are amazing. Super wholesome. So they're just so pure. They don't. Like, I think with autistic people, like obviously it varies, but like I think the people they choose there, like if they meet someone immediately and they like them, they're in love with them, and they just tell them. I was like, that's great.
Exactly.
Why can it not be that easy? Like, there's all this fucking weird shit on top which stops you from doing like that. I was like, I find them very inspiring. But yeah, that's me. How about you, Oz?
It's in two pieces. One is I've been wanting to watch this thing for years about the kids who got stuck in the cave back in 2018, and they did a film for it called 13 Lives. And then when I watched that, it's got Colin Farrell in it. And then when I watched it, I loved it. And then I went and watched the Disney documentary on it as well, straight after, called The Rescue. And it was just so fascinating to just watch these two English blokes lead this sort of like cave rescue team. And I didn't realise how complicated it was. Like, who in their right mind wants to go deep into the ocean or deep into like caves, get stuck into sort of like crevices and find your way through for hours and hours on end. It was insane. And I really, it really made me just think about just like the power of the human mind, like, you know, what you can do if you want to do it. But I wouldn't want to do it, so my mind's not.
Just watch it on a TV. Well, thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate you coming on and chatting. As we've said, is there any last sales pitch you want to throw out to our audience and listeners?
Surviving Earth is out in cinemas from the 24th of April. Please watch it where you can find it. We are at a handful of cinemas across the UK. And so please watch it. And if you like it and if you love it, spread the word.
Letterboxd exists. Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.